Hello and welcome to the Dungeon Masters Guild House. This is a weekly podcast where I, your host, Matthew Whitby, sit down with people all across the DMsGuild and tabletop RPG space to just generally chat about stuff. This week, I'm overjoyed to be joined by Matt Davids. Hello.
Hey, Matthew, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's a pleasure.
No, thank you and stuff. Yeah, from one Matt to another, we've got to stick together.
Yeah, I've been interviewing a lot of Matts on my podcast. I don't know. There's a lot of guys named Matthew.
I noticed that there is I don't know what it is about the tabletop RPG spaces, but there's a lot of similar names. There's a good number of Matts. There is a good number of Jameses. I believe there's a good number of Jesses as well. I don't know. Maybe it's just there's there's an effect with if you're named Harry Firefighter, you're more likely to become a firefighter or something like that. There's a weird trend like that. So maybe it's just these common names are so common.
Yeah, Matthews are creative or something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. We'll go with that. I think that's a nice way. Speaking about being creative, though, for the people listening, why didn't you just tell us some of the things that you've kind of been publishing?
Yeah, well, I guess kind of what I'm known for mostly is the books of random tables. Those are kind of my flagship products that I put out. And so I have tables for fantasy, science fiction, cyberpunk, modern, all kinds of Wild West, all kinds of different settings, and just, as you can imagine, all kinds of things. So items you would find in a dungeon room, items you'd find in a cell, items you'd find wherever, in an inn's kitchen, just all kinds of tables. So that's what I am mostly known for.
So I guess the first question off the bat is what's the allure of random tables then? What kind of drew you into it?
Well, what drew me into it really is that is how I enjoyed running games. That my players would always ask to search the room, right? And so they want to search the room, and it got old. It got really old just to say, oh, there's nothing in the room, right? Oh, there's nothing there. You don't find anything. So what I really like to do, kind of in years past, is I would make my own. I would just make my own random table. And so when somebody would search, a room, I could just have, if they got a certain whatever skill, whatever system we were using, say a perception roll over a certain amount, I'd say, oh, well, you got one roll on a table, or you got 4 rolls on the table, depending on how good your roll was or something like that. And I saw that was very popular with my players. Even if the item on the table was a dead rat, people were excited about that. Because, like I said, just saying there's nothing in the room over and over again is just really boring. And it's just kind of, deadening. Even if, say you're in a dungeon room and you find the key, the magic key that was really supposed to be in the room, and that's where it's going to lead the players on to the next part of the campaign. Well, why not give somebody else something else, even if it's a dead rat or a rusty nail or or 1 gold piece or something that they can just find lying around in the room.
I think you kind of see that a fair bit with at least in D&D with the wild magic sorcerer. I think people really like kind of knowing that they're rolling a random table, that the DM is hands off the wheel, and this is that you're at the mercy of this table or whatever you find.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find too that sometimes people will kind of, not want to run a game because they're worried about conflict, being the judge or the referee between rules. Mm-hmm. So the random table, I think, solves that problem, because I didn't give Mary 12 gold pieces, and I didn't give Ryan a dead rat. Yeah. The table gave them. You rolled. If you wanted 12 gold pieces, you should have rolled an 86 or whatever it is. If you didn't want a dead rat, you shouldn't have rolled an 11, whatever. Yeah. So it takes it off me, and it's not me that's making those kind of decisions to give certain players, I'm not playing favorites among my players. It's just the table.
It's well, I suppose it's the slippery slope to well, I didn't kill your character, the dice did.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess you could go there. But
No, so
Yeah.
I guess,
or it's not the dice, it's your poor decisions there, right?
as long as I'm not to blame, as long as it's, you know, the players
Exactly.
and the fates or whatever. So I guess then is again with all the sort of random tables that you kind of like, you know, created over the years and stuff like that, is have you kind of picked up what you would call like what is a good sense of what is a good random table and what is a bad, like I don't know, like do you like look at across like RPGs and see a random table and go
You know, sometimes I mean, I think to me some of the worst, what I would say the worst random table would be just not enough options. Sometimes you see random tables that are, you know, 1d4 or something, and unless you're rolling for, you know, maybe the 4 seasons, you know,
yeah.
I think you should probably have, you know, a bit more options on the table. I think ones that that I mean, my view of random tables is it should take work off the game master or the dungeon master. So if the random table causes more work, then I would say it was a bad one. But, you know, at the end of the day, random tables are awesome. So if your book, whatever system you're running, if it comes with random tables, it's probably going to be a help to you in some way.
I think again the thing that I sometimes run into is that, at least in the adventure content that I write, sometimes I like to use essentially random tables for essentially encounters across like a travel path.
Yeah.
But I guess the thing I try and run into is the fact that it's I don't know, I'm sometimes hesitant to be like, oh, it's just, you know, this encounter is 4 skeletons, because I always feel like there needs to be a little bit more context.
Yes.
And again, sometimes with at least with like sort of item tables, it is very nice to be like, it is just a dead rat, and you don't necessarily need all the sort of history. I guess, how do you find about balancing the amount of information in a random table, you know, against like an item table versus like a monster encounter table, or you know, what have you?
Yeah. The monster encounter tables are the trickiest, right? Because if I say, you know, okay, yeah, random table of monster encounters, 1d4 goblins. Well, I don't know, you know, what the game master is running. I don't know the gaming group. What if they're 18th level, right? They have 6 players that are all 18th level. Well, 4 goblins, I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? So those tables, I mean, frankly, sometimes I try to stay away from some of those because you know, as a dungeon master or game master myself, if I want to throw some combat at my players, even on a travel, you know, they're traveling and I think, oh, well, I'll give them a couple times of random combat or something. That doesn't take me much time or mental space to really kind of throw something like that at them. Where I get caught and what I try to focus on are the item tables. Because when I really get caught and I am caught and I have no more creativity is when the, you know, the 7th player at the table asks me, what do I find in the room? And I'm just like, oh, well, you know, after all of those other players have asked, it's like, well, I don't know, right? Like my brain is just there. But if I have, you know, if I have 6 1d100 tables that have items in a dungeon room, well, okay, let's just roll on that table.
I guess you like two really quick things is one, I do think sometimes there is like some comedic value in throwing 6 goblins at a 18th level party, just because at that point, like, it's a case of like, they're goblins, they don't know any better. But no, I think you touched on a really good point, the fact that like sometimes taking I guess the pressure off the DM on like, it's kind of easier to do the high concept stuff of like what's going to happen during the session, but it's like the little details, like what is in the room, what is this NPC's name, what is you know, what is their sort of like physical characteristics. It's definitely the sort of like the smaller details that, again, if you say, oh, you encounter 12 guards, and they go, you know, what's number 8's name? I want to go to number 8, and it's like, what?
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. And that's what I'm talking about there, because I think it's pretty, if for a dungeon master, it's pretty easy in some regards to say, okay, well, we've been playing our campaign for a while. This session, they're going to meet 12 guards. But the problem then comes in when they say, oh, I'm going to ask guard number 1 his name. I'm going to ask guard number 2 their name. I'm going to ask guard number 3 their name. And those are just things that that where your mind kind of can just like turn into clay after you're running a game for a while, and you start having all the guards are named Bob or or Sally or some ridiculous name, or the physical descriptions. You mentioned that one. That's a really good one too, because sometimes I think we can kind of get into that creative rut when we're just caught on the fly, and your players, I've had this happen sometimes, right? Like a player will say, hey, that's like the fourth like really tall guy with a beard we've met in this same, and I was just like, oh, well, I'm just making these up. All right. I'm trying to come up with these. So if I have a list of those, I can just roll that and get a different physical description that maybe I wouldn't have thought of.
It's a very fashionable in this side of town. There's a whole new rage going in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess so across everything that you've going to be doing, then I guess like so when exactly did you start with the round tables, or just with publishing content?
Well, that would have been in it was right at the end of 2015, so December 2015. It was kind of a crazy story. I don't know how heavy you want to get on a podcast, but what actually really started me off was a friend of mine died, right? And he was 36, and he left, a wife and 3 little kids. And at his funeral, I was seeing people that I hadn't seen in a long time, obviously 10 years, 20 years, maybe even 30 years, give away my age, but, that I hadn't seen. And we were talking, and we were all talking about when we used to role play together, right? Because that's what my friends and we all did, was role play. And my friend started asking me about this game called Anarchy. They're like, Anarchy. And this was a game that I had made, right? So that was my first kind of really try at really making games. That was when I was a teenager and in my early 20s. And they were like, what about it? We used to play all together, our friend who had passed away and all of us. And I was like, well, I haven't done anything with it in like 20 years. What are you talking? And so I just thought, maybe I will write that game up, and I will publish it, and I will be able to dedicate it to my friend. I'll be able to put his name in there and dedicate it, because he was one of my most prolific play testers, actually. So I did that. I mean, and I started in 2014, and it took me a long time. I found some old notes. I found some old files on my computer. I found some old, notes that I had, and I pulled it out, and I realized it was completely unplayable by anybody but me, right? Like I could have played it. I could have ran it for somebody, but nobody else could do it. So I converted that to the OpenD6 system, and it took me like a year. And so I published it at the end of 2015 on DriveThruRPG and on Amazon. And it was kind of one of those moments where kind of doing that, like my first goal, like I said, was to have a book in my hand, and I could say, hey, I dedicate it to my friend. Here we go. But it was one of those moments when I kind of remembered back to when I was like 9 years old and playing D&D for the first time. And I was like, oh, this is what I've wanted to do all my life. I wanted to create role-playing games or role-playing game content in some way. And so that just kind of started me there. So then in 2016, I really started publishing things on DriveThruRPG. As far as the DMsGuild, I've really only published one. I published something last year, trying to use some of the D&D IP. I published a little thing called the Bookhounds of Eberron, and I didn't do it very well, frankly, but that was kind of really my first stab at that. But and then kind of from there, I was just experimenting and doing kind of some stuff. And it was when I remembered, I was like, I think I was running a session, and I'm using my random table that I had made. And I was just like, if I like random tables, I bet you everybody likes random tables. So I started really publishing the random tables, and that's when things kind of spiral out of control. I think I have like 14 or 15 books of random tables now.
Wow, I'd say that is again that's such a heartfelt, incredible story. Again, thank you so much for like going. Like it's and yeah, I imagine having that sort of like epiphany of like, I've kind of always wanted to be doing this and stuff like that. It's kind of been, it's no, it's again, it's a I was about to say a fantastic origin story, but I don't know if that's going to be
my superhero origin story.
So one thing I did kind of want to chat about as well is, so some of your random table books are actually up on Amazon.
Yeah,
and stuff like that. I must admit, I'm fascinated about the kind of print side, and again, I know that there are differences between Drive-Thru and DMsGuild, but I am so insular to the DMsGuild community that I'm just like, I haven't sort of dipped my toes too much in the Drive-Thru. So if I understand it correctly, with the content you release on the Drive-Thru, you do actually you're essentially allowed to sort of publish it on other sort of and what are there any particular challenges about getting it up on the Amazon storefront?
No, not really. Now you could, the print books, there is no exclusivity, but you can, if you wanted to, you could sign it exclusivity with Drive-Thru for your PDFs. If you want to. I don't have one of those right now, but getting it up on Amazon, I mean, frankly, it's super easy, right? I mean, it's just, that's their business, right? So they're used to dealing with people who are not really tech savvy, and they make it incredibly easier. It's actually just from like a standpoint of like logging in and using the back end. Amazon is way easier than Drive-Thru RPG. It's just, they have billions of dollars to make it easy. So it is very easy to get your book up on Amazon. Yeah.
Oh. And then I guess also, so you kind of touched on a little bit earlier that you have, you've, unlike me, you've dipped your toes in the DMsGuild side of things. I'm curious about what was kind of was it just like, I just want to try something a little bit different? Or was it the allure of the Eberron setting, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a combination of all, right? I mean, obviously I love Dungeons and Dragons. There's no getting around that. I've been, it was the first role-playing game I've ever played, and I love it. And so Eberron is really cool. I do like the setting. I think it was just kind of seeing a lot what was going on the DMsGuild side, and kind of, being kind of exposed to that, because I know one thing, years ago and stuff, when I would play, I'm one of those guys who creates my own stuff, right? Yeah. So I wasn't really, I didn't know much about some of the Forgotten Realms and stuff like that, just because, I've read a book here or two, right? But I would just make up my own worlds and stuff. So I was just kind of intrigued by that, and I thought I had a pretty good idea. So I thought the Bookhounds of Eberron was a pretty good idea, and so I released that. And and what I learned is, especially on the DMsGuild side, I know one thing, that I should have spent a lot more time on it. I should have also tried to polish it a little bit more for the DMsGuild side, and I probably should have kind of really found some other kind of hook for the IP. Instead of I just kind of had a more of a vague concept of like hunting for rare books in Eberron, and I still think it was a good idea. I think I made it pretty quickly, and I released it to kind of see what would happen, and it is quite a bit different than, say, the Drive-Thru RPG side, where I guess the people on the DMsGuild are looking for certain products.
Yeah,
You know,
I guess actually I don't know. So what do you think are like some of the, I guess, the differences between the two kind of storefronts? Because again, the relationship between the DMs Guild and the Tribe, it feels like a weird sort of like, I don't know, like that's like a sibling rivalry. I don't know how to put it into words. It's like they're sometimes on speaking terms. It's
yeah. Well, I mean, if I have my fantasy random tables on Drive Through RPG, that person could be playing Dungeons and Dragons. They could be playing 13th Age. They could be, Forbidden Lands. They could be playing, what are some of them? Tunnels and Trolls. They could be whatever it is. Dungeon World even. I mean, they could be even playing that, and because those would help them. So on the DMs Guild, right? What are people playing?
Yeah,
playing D&D, right? I think it was just for me, it would be trying to understand what are people who are playing D&D, 2-3 times a week, maybe once a week. What are they really looking for? As opposed to on Drive Through RPG, they may not even be playing Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah.
They could be playing something else.
Yeah, I suppose that is the challenge of writing essentially very much like, again, system agnostic content of just, things that can go anywhere. Whereas, with the DMs Guild, I feel like most people, at least when they come into it, I think they come with a certain expectation that the products have the same sort of dress and format as if, the D&D hardcovers.
Yes.
Which again is immediately like the case of like, well, now I have to try and copy a book that is worked on like by a team of designers that goes through a series of layout artists,
15 editors.
So it's instantly and it's funny, it's I think we kind of mentioned this once or twice through kind of conversation, is since the kind of inception of the DMs Guild, it feels like there's been something of like a raising arms race in terms of production quality. I guess it kind of with that kind of the DMs Guild is this kind of very weird, quite insular community.
And that's kind of why I was saying I think some of the bigger problems that I had was that I should have spent more time on it. I should have had some more editing. I should have developed it a little bit more, because I think that audience is used to Wizards of the Coast level material, and I mean, and they should be, right? I mean, it's great. It's great material. So I should have spent a bit more time and really fleshed out the idea more than I did.
So actually, that kind of raises an interesting question, which is, so when you come to like write content that you're going to be publishing on the drive-through, do you kind of have to go through like some checks to kind of make sure it's like agnostic enough to be that it's not like tied to any sort of system or anything too much?
No, I mean, honestly, that's the beauty of random tables, right? Because I usually stick to percentile dice. So even if you're playing, a D6 system, I would assume that people have 2 percentile dice in their bag, right? And that you could just pull those out and and roll on my random table, even if you're playing that or you're playing the 2d20 system or something. That I would assume that any self-respecting role player would have a bag full of dice.
There would probably be at least 1 or 2 dice in the room somewhere.
Exactly. And if you need to, there's a dice roller on Google or whatever, and you can use that. But I mean, to me, I think it's almost the, even though I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons now every week for like 3 or 4 years, I think it's easier for me to do system agnostic content than to do really D&D specific content, because, system agnostic content is pretty self-explanatory, where the Dungeons and Dragons content, you really have to make it fit into, you really have to make it fit into that system, and you have to make it fit what somebody, what groups of D&D players are really kind of into.
No, fair. So then I guess to talk more broadly about your kind of creative process then. So what for any particular product is it the case you sit down and go, okay, well today's a dungeon table, and then you have your, I guess, empty table of 100 options. And is your creative process just to kind of go through and start kind of like, just one after the other chipping through them, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Sometimes tables, sometimes the idea for a table comes to me from different places. I'll be running a game, and I'll think, oh, a blacksmith shop. I don't have a list for that.
Yeah.
And now I'm running a game. My players are going to ask me. So if they ask me something, I might just jot down a few things, if they're going to ask me a question, what's in a blacksmith shop? But yeah, usually when I set out to make a new book, I just kind of, in the beginning, I was all haphazard and crazy, and I just did whatever I thought about. And I would try to work on, I would get one idea for one table, and I'd do 5 items, and then I'd get another idea, for another one. But now that I've gotten a little bit more systematic, I do try to just sit down and start writing out items. For something like a blacksmith shop, of course, I would use, Google and the internet. I would look around, see what was in a blacksmith shop, and, whatever, 1403. Probably not too far from where you are in the UK. And so I would get those items, and I would kind of compile some of those or add some of my own. It is, I've been playing either D&D or some other role-playing game since I was 9 years old. So I kind of got a pretty good sense for what players like.
Yeah.
So players like certain things. And so, even if I'm doing a crazy table, of items in a dungeon room, there are some little items that I know that are, just in a past session or something, years ago, that I saw a player lose their mind over. And it is a thing that you couldn't even sell for a silver piece, right? It's just it's a almost worthless little item, but they've lost their minds over. And so it's just okay, I'm putting that one on the table because I know somewhere out there a player is going to be like, oh man, this is so cool.
Is it the dead rat again? Or is it?
Is it the dead rat? No, the dead rat usually, the dead rat actually gets people to come back, right? They want to search again. They want to roll. The next room, they want to roll, and they're like, okay, now I know number 8 or whatever is a dead rat. So I'm going to check that off my list. So if I know I don't roll an 8, I'm not going to get a dead rat. I think I don't know. I think that's just goes into the whole appeal of the random table as well, right? That you just don't know what you're going to get. You could get a dead rat, or you could get the 1d12 gold pieces.
Then I guess so. What are some of the examples of the one the sort of table answers that the party are going to get a little bit, or at least someone has a high chance of getting excited or hyped for?
Yeah. Usually, I know people would say, oh, the gold piece one, but sometimes, the gold piece one, but usually something with an inscription on it.
Nice.
It can be, an iron ring, but on the inside is an inscription of, ERB, the initials ERB.
Yeah.
Players what? What does that mean? And you can even add a little bit more to it, but they go crazy over stuff like that.
And what was it? Every NPC they ask the name, and if their name starts with an E, they're just is it ERB? Is it you?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Absolutely. So little things like that. I think one thing in obviously in 5e, the trinket table. So just little things, a deed to a castle in a faraway land, right?
Exactly.
Players go crazy for that. And it's just well, we're never going to go to that land, but it doesn't matter, right? It gives them something to think about. It's oh, once we're level 20 and we end this campaign, I'm going to say my character, he's going to this faraway land to claim this deed on this castle.
It's kind of nice, I guess. So I guess for me, there would always be the balance of like you kind of can use them as an opportunity, I guess, to kind of plant story seeds in a way.
Yeah.
But then I guess my other part is like it's kind of hard not to lean too hard on like the comedy angle of just making it. It's kind of like you find I don't know like the the remains of two goblins who clearly were engaged in like a knife fight. I don't know if that's funny. I don't know. As I've now said it, I'm like, is that funny? I don't know. That's just murder.
You have a strange comedy. No. Absolutely, and I definitely use that as well. I know I have a table with like items in a wizard's chamber, and one of the items I put on there is a map to a legendary library, right? So I mean that could kick off a whole new campaign, and I know it really kind of goes along with my style of role playing. Like I don't plan much when I run a session or a campaign, so if I thought we were doing some kind of, dark political kind of gritty urban area adventure, and my players go into the wizard's chamber and they search and they roll the map to the legendary library, and then all my players say, actually, you know what? We want to go find this library and we want to leave the city. I'm like, okay. Like, sure. Because I was running the city while I was making it up anyway. So we'll just make up going to a legendary library. I know some people, they can get a little frustrated with that, but like, I personally love planting all of those things. So then the players can really, really grab onto those and, really kind of run with it and really make the game your own. And it just creates, I don't know. I love randomness pretty much in all of its facets. I like using the dice for a lot of things, even possibly the campaign, the setting, all of that.
I must admit, I think I kind of agree, because I think I'm very much like, I kind of like to throw a lot of sort of adventure hooks, or just like, every third person they meet gives them a quest. And it's a case of like, right now we're helping like the old lady down the road. We've got a dragon to slay. We can't quite go search for your missing child yet, but it's like it's kind of nice, because then you give them a decent sense of agency just by choosing what tasks and how they kind of. So yeah, the idea of like searching a room and getting just throwing more stuff in the pile. If it's important to the players, you'll find out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I did want to ask though, what would you say is the weirdest table that you've done?
Oh gosh. Oh man, the weirdest. I have one on mutations. So if something happens to your character and it gets mutated, you may have tentacles or something at the end. The funniest one, I have talking inanimate objects. That kind of actually became a joke in my gaming group, and some of the guys who've helped me edit some of the tables and stuff like that. They saw on a couple of my tables I had like a talking tree and a talking something. So we've kind of always and then in one campaign actually we ran across a talking broom. So I was like, all right, everybody is having fun with these talking objects. So I just made a whole table that's just like a belt buckle who claims to be a wizard, just all kinds of crazy objects that
I was think because the idea of it being like talking and stuff like that, it just kind of ticks that box of like the player party who just likes gathering like companions.
Yes.
And stuff like that, and just be like, oh yeah, no, yeah. Every so often we get like a quip from the belt buckle, or
yes. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it just adds to the world. It just adds an extra layer onto the world, and it can be silly, or who knows? I mean, the belt buckle may actually be a powerful wizard and lead them to some great quest.
Yeah. I like the idea that there is a fantasy world in which wizards, they dedicate their life to their craft, and the pinnacle of what their research is just making inanimate objects talk. It's like I'm in a lot of wizard debt for this, but I've now got a talk.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're always alone, so they always need friends.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that there is a story there of like, a wizard tower filled with these talking objects, but the wizard has gone missing or something. So they just natter amongst themselves.
Well, that's a whole adventure campaign right there.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go with that.
So there you go. It's yeah. No, dude, that's such a cool idea. See now my mind is wandering about what sort of talking like. So there's two sides of things. I do like the idea of like objects that can talk, but I also do like the idea of like sassy animate objects that can't talk. So like I've had it once where my player party stole a hag's broom. And I decided that the hag's broom itself would have something of a personality, and that because they had stolen it, the broom had a tendency to, try and throw the rider off occasionally,
or like hit them on the head when they're sitting there and stuff.
And it's a case of like I was hoping that they would realize that maybe they should return the broom, or they should, but no, that kind of just enamored them to it more. And I'm just like, this broom probably will kill one of you at some point. It's gonna like.
Let it try. That's what players always say.
So then I guess across everything that you kind of do then, is there like a part of the project that like is hands down your favorite? Is it kind of like the ideation or
like in the creative process?
Yeah, just from well, I guess across anything really.
Yeah. Well, in the creative process, actually I do like kind of the ideation part of it, because I have a million ideas, but actually I've come to learn that my actual favorite part is holding the finished book, because up until 2015, all I did was think about ideas instead of writing them down or organizing them. So yeah, my favorite part is putting the finishing touches on it, and pressing submit on DriveThruRPG and watching it come up.
And with it the is it 3 to 6 week wait on like getting a print back?
Oh yeah. If you're doing print, it's a long time.
No, 100%. I think with it, so I've had the fortune to kind of have at least like some of my words in someone else's project go to print. And so I don't know, just holding that book is like, this is something that like I did.
I love that part. I love being finished.
Then I guess on the other end of the spectrum, is there like a least favorite part?
Oh man, the problem is that I love doing this. So probably the least favorite part is staring at a blank page, right? Like having a few ideas, but then opening up the document and just staring at that blank page and being like, okay, talking inanimate objects, what's next, or whatever, just having that blank page there. But once things get rolling, I really enjoy it.
So I imagine, obviously you kind of mentioned you kind of work with percentile dice. Is it on average that each table is like 100 options?
Yes. Wow. Yeah. I try to do that. Talking inanimate objects might be like 50, but sometimes I do 50, but I usually try to do them all for 100 options.
And in one of your books, how many tables do you kind of offer throughout? Is it like 20?
In the smaller books, usually like 25 to 40 some some of the smaller books.
So like 2,500 like options. Which is again that is a considerable amount of options. I can't necessarily imagine what the process of filling a D100. I don't think I've ever written out a full D100 table. I can't imagine it would be easy, because again, at what point it's like I guess trying to make each one unique enough and try and keep them within like a reasonable scope, or is it the case where sometimes you just kind of let your mind go wild and it's like improv where there's no wrong answers?
Yeah. Sometimes I just try to kind of let loose, and usually though, I will admit, usually if I've just been working on a table for a while, when I usually get to about 90 options, that's usually when I'm like, I don't want to see this table again. Like I just don't want to see this again. So that's usually when I go ask my wife. I'd be like, what's weird in a dungeon room? And she'll give me a couple ideas, and I'm like, okay, I got it now. I can do the last 10.
Outsourcing, clever.
Yes, exactly. And I don't use dead rat again or whatever it is.
I don't know, maybe could you make it slightly more exciting, like 2 dead rats?
Oh yes, there you go. Yes, I try not to do that.
Yeah.
I try not to do that. Yeah. I try to give some more options. I mean, maybe sometimes, but if it's a cool thing, if there's, I mean, it's always fun to find a couple gold pieces. So you throw a few gold pieces on there.
Yeah. I suppose,
D8 gold
like,
pieces.
How meta could you get? Because you could have like a D100 table within a D100 table. So like, let's say you roll like an 8. And that's the rat table, and then you go to another 100 table of like 100 different types of dead rat.
Yeah, well, I mean, in my new book, I took some of the random tables from my first 4 fantasy random table books and from the Bookhounds of Eberron, and I put them into a big book. And there's 120 random tables in there. Jeez. And at one point, I did think about making a random table of all the table titles so you could just roll, but it doesn't make much sense because from where you're at, since they're so, it could be, items in a dungeon room, or it could be, forest encounters. It doesn't make much sense to put them all in one table.
So with the new book, is it essentially just a continuation of the series, or is this actually a new focus?
Well, this is kind of a compendium of a
one-stop shop.
Yes, of the books of random tables 1 through 4, the fantasy ones, and then plus some of the book title tables from Bookhounds of Eberron that I put them all together in one book, and also I really went through them, and I've learned a lot more about editing and and that. So I went through them. Some of the first ones that I did, weren't that great, so I made them better and improved them. Had a couple people read them through and give me editing on them and put them together, really made up some new tables as well to kind of just put them all in there so that you could either get them in one PDF or you could get them in a hardback. Yeah.
Jeez, and so again, I feel like my brain is. So did you say something like there's 100 D100 table, 100 plus D100?
There's 120. Table? There's 120 in there.
That's a lot of tables. I think this is. I'll be again, if there are any more tables out there, I will be surprised.
Well, I'm working on another one, so I'm working on more. So.
The work is never done.
No, I don't think you can have enough. I don't, and it's not just because I make them, but just as a game master, anything that if this table helps me, cut down, if it cuts down my decisions by like 10 decisions at the table, I'll take that table, right? Like I'll use that table.
And no, I imagine as well. It's like, again, it's why, I guess, again, there's nothing necessarily wrong about having 2 tables for similar things, because again, they can have necessarily maybe different themes to them, or just more options. Maybe you again, this is when we get into the meta. You roll a table to find which table you use.
Yeah. Well, I mean, items in an inn's kitchen, right? So I have one of those, but I could make a second one.
Yeah.
Because could be all kinds of stuff in an inn's kitchen.
Yeah. No, and I suppose it's again in the sort of like commonplace, like things like taverns, blacksmiths, the sort of thing, the things that people are going to again and again and again. I guess you do, even with a random table. I imagine you could probably burn through 100 unique options surprisingly quick.
Yeah, very quick, very quickly. So that's why, to me, like, you can just never have enough random tables, and they're just always helpful. And if you just have more, why not?
So then, I guess, is there any particular design choice that you've made that you're like particularly proud of, like when it comes to these tables, or just, I guess, more broadly?
Well, I mean, some other projects. I mean, for the random tables, making them system agnostic was a big choice for me, and I think that makes a lot of sense. For some other projects, I was really proud that I was able to take that idea that I had talked about before, anarchy, and really convert it into the open D6 system. I didn't realize at the time, like 300 people in the world play the Open D6 system. Not many people do, but I was really proud that I was able to kind of put that into the system and make it work. Because I know that for anybody else who's listening, that's the old West End Star Wars game system. It's the D6. It's now the Open D6 system, and so I was able to use that with the Open Gaming license. So I was proud of that. But the one I'm kind of most proud of, it gets really good reviews, but it doesn't sell well. But it is a campaign setting for 5e, and I made it, and then of course I realized you can't put campaign settings on the DMsGuild, so I published it on Drive-Thru. But it's called Realms of Understreet, and it is the kind of the nutshell is fantasy kingdoms of rats living under modern day Manhattan Island. And so it was really the first time, taking 5e kind of rules and converting them into, humans become rats, dragonborn become salamanders, kind of things like that. And then taking some of the open game license creatures and making them a moth or a pill bug or, something along those lines. I really thought that I put a lot of creativity into that, and I think that's probably one of the one of the settings that I'm really most proud of. Yeah.
So is it like a modern day Manhattan, or is it almost like a?
No, it's the Manhattan is modern day, but the rats, the underneath, they are in fantasy kingdoms with magic and stuff like this, and so. So I thought that was kind of one of my most creative and like I said, it gets a lot of good reviews, but it doesn't sell well because it's a kind of a niche. So if you like, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, or you like Redwall, or you like The Borrowers, that's kind of what that kind of thing kind of goes.
I imagine. It's kind of surprising how there is that sort of like subgenre of sort of like almost like
tiny
tiny people in like a fantasy setting, but still within the scope of like modern day. It's again. Also, the rats, they come up again. I'm noticing a bit of a trend or a theme.
Oh no! I need to maybe see somebody about that.
You've got like a subconscious rat bias.
Yes.
No, awesome. Yeah, I'm curious about. So what was like? I'm always fascinated about when it comes to like setting guides or setting content, because there is so much you could put into a setting guide, and I'm curious about how you kind of found that balance of like, okay, this is the core stuff that kind of needs to go in, or this stuff can kind of be left up.
Yeah, well, frankly, I don't know if I did. I don't know if I found that.
I mean, if it's getting rave reviews,
it does. It does have some good reviews. But like I said, it doesn't sell well. But I think some of the key points was really trying to give them a flavor, right? The rats and the mice and some of the different, give them flavors of their own culture. So people can't, you don't just open up the book and go, well, you just took human stats and made them rats, right? You just called them rats. So I really tried to go into like naming conventions, and I use quotes throughout, like quotes that the rats have written, from their history and things like that, to really try to give the world an extra flavor. So that's what I really focused on. As far as some of the rules, I kind of, I created a couple new backgrounds and things, but I kind of just wanted, I kept that kind of content to a minimum, because I figured once people saw what I was kind of doing there, it would be pretty easy just to say, okay, well, I'll take a tiger, and that can be a house cat or whatever, because, everything is basically, just kind of, the same. It's just, just styled a little bit differently. So I really went into the world and really tried to create a flavor of the world to show that they had a unique culture. So that's where I came down in the end. But yeah, I probably that was one of probably the second or third thing that I did. So I probably did it wrong, but
I get it. You learn as you go, but no, yeah, 100%. I think as well, you can get incredibly far with just sort of like, as you kind of said, like reskinning and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's just through the case of like, mechanically, everything is functionally the same, but it just builds to this kind of this world setting that you've kind of built there.
Mm-hmm.
No, awesome. And then, so I guess in talking about like some of your earlier stuff then that you kind of did, is there like a lesson through some of the stuff that you kind of initially started with that you kind of wish you'd learned maybe just a smidgen earlier?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, like on a practical, like technical level, that it's very hard to get drive-through RPGs print, the lightning source print, to take a Scribus file, because I was using Scribus. It's very hard to do that. So that was, I wasted time and effort on that, and instead of before I was able to switch to InDesign. But if you're using Scribus and you're going to try to do print on Drive-Thru RPG, get ready. You need somebody smarter than I am, because it was rough. So on the technical side, the other side that I know that people don't talk about too much, is because we're creatives and we want to talk about, is the marketing, right? I mean, I released my first game, and what happened? I released that Anarchy game. What do you think happened? Nothing. Right? I just threw it into the void, right? I mean, you can go on Drive-Thru RPG in the morning and then go back in the evening, and there's 15 new free products, 5 new print products. And I mean, it's just amazing the amount of content. I mean, I think it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. I love the hobby. I love to see so many people into it. So, I mean, that first lesson right there is just that, you need to build a community around, some of your work, or you need to be ready to market it in some way, either through paid ads or through banners on Drive-Thru RPG with what are the publisher points, or the PPP, or whatever they call it. You just kind of need to be ready to, you have to create, and then you have to put on your marketing hat if you want people to see your work. Which is difficult, because most people, again, you don't really necessarily go into the hobby with marketing chops, or sort of thing. It's for a good number of people, it's kind of unnatural to be like, oh, now I need to sell myself, and so it's like everyone kind of wants their product to kind of speak for itself, and so, but you have to kind of sometimes put in that extra little bit of legwork. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to like try to force all your friends to buy your stuff and everything. And it doesn't have to be bad. I mean, you just need to tell people about it. And I mean, people just don't know about it. And I think, even now, well, not this past year, but I was going to say when I went to conventions, I haven't been to one this past year, of course, because they were all canceled. But when I would go to conventions, I would hear things, and I had a bit of this too. Somebody says, "Oh, I put out this new thing," and they put a lot of heart and effort into it, and they're like, "Nobody bought it. It must be bad." And I'm just like, "No, nobody knows about it." No. Right? It could be the best. It could be the best game since Dungeons and Dragons. It's just, if nobody knows about it, nobody's gonna buy it. People have to know about it. And that's kind of half the battle, I guess, in some ways. Yeah, maybe 80%. I think it's 80%. Marketing's 80%. That's true. 20%. I know people don't like to hear this when I say this, but it's writing, layout, design, uploading, publishing. 20% of the work. 80% of the work is marketing. And even then, sometimes it's sometimes marketing is just sort of like a coin flip, whether it's kind of depending on what you do. Yes. Yes. With paid ads, it can just be a total random. Like I said, there's always cases where you can do things again. There's all these sort of checkboxes, things that you can take to kind of improve your odds and stuff like that. But it's like there's a good amount of chance in it. You touched on the community a little bit before, but I guess, is there anyone kind of in the tabletop RPG community that kind of particularly inspires you and your kind of line of work? Yeah, a few people. I mean, you're one of them. I mean, the Volo's Guide to Getting Murdered, the way, the like kind of just leaning into the IP of Dungeons and Dragons, I think that's brilliant. It's just great.
I must admit, that was like one of the lessons that I kind of learned. Like I think it was it was RP Davis who kind of sat me down. I was like, well, it didn't sat me down. It wasn't like I wasn't being told off or anything. But in the sense that the DMs Guild, you are paying for the IP.
Yeah.
You are not obligated to use it, but it's in your best interest to use it, because otherwise, you should be publishing on like drive-through. So I was like, you know what? Yeah, I can't think of any better way to use the IP than just take some characters and kill them.
I think that was great. And I think and people who are playing Dungeons and Dragons all the time are going to know those characters and they're going to be interested in them. I think that was fantastic. I mean, I think some other ones, say Kevin Crawford with Stars Without Number, I don't know how you do a $200,000 Kickstarter and then have your book be in the top 20 bestsellers for like 3 years. It's just amazing. And then he's also very open with questions on Reddit and other things like that. It's just but I mean, really, there are so many people. There's so many cool creators in the space that it's really hard to name all of them. And I've got to meet some really cool people and interview them on my podcast as well, and just hear some of the stuff that they're working on and doing. It's very inspiring.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, I think I've kind of mentioned this before. It's kind of like it's kind of cheaty that as running a podcast, it's an excuse to chat to cool people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And I get some people sometimes they're like, did it go well or whatever? And it's like, we're just like two people talking about what we love. I mean, how is it not going to go well? Right?
Yeah, it's just like, again, there's rarely a chance where I'm like, oh, that really drags. It's like, no, it's like it's two passionate people and stuff, and it's a case of like, I see it as like I'm learning. I'm learning. They don't know it. They think they're a guest, but secretly I'm draining information from them.
Oh, absolutely. I'm trying to learn from everybody I interview. Absolutely. Yeah. And asking questions. Yeah. Like you're doing as well. It's just like, I think I learned that about the IP on Dungeons and Dragons from like listening to you, asking you questions. It's like, oh, right. Use the thing that people like when you're on the DMsGuild that you can use. That's amazing.
I'm fighting a blush. Oh, sure. So then, I guess they kind of like some of the final questions, Matt, then to kind of again round off this hour, which has flown by, and just two people chatting about their passions.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are you currently working on? And kind of more importantly, where can people hear about it?
Yeah, well, I did just release the Great Book of Random Tables on Drive-Thru-RPG as we're recording this. What is this? March 2021, if I can remember the date. So I just released the Great Book of Random Tables, and that took me a lot of time to put that one together. I'm also continuing to work on my podcast, interviewing fantastic creators. I also like to reach out of the RPG space sometimes, and I've interviewed like filmmakers and screenwriters and just to try to understand story, and novelists just to try to understand story more and to use that to help us as we're creating or as we're running games. So I've been working on those. I've got some more random table books coming. I'm going to do another fantasy, kind of a 25 table random book. I have, in addition to some of the fantasy, like I had mentioned before, I do have some of the other settings like science fiction, cyberpunk, Wild West, modern, 1920s and 1930s. I'm currently working on one for steampunk, kind of steampunk Victorian, kind of random tables. And I'll have a few more of those coming down here. Well, I don't know when, but in the coming months, I'm sure I'll get a few out. Yeah, in the future, I'll get a few out. And then, it's just as far as finding me, everything that I do can be found on DiceGeeks.com. So it's just the word dice and the word geeks just put together. So on DiceGeeks.com, everybody can find what I am working on, what I'm doing. I guess I should mention, I did release a while back a book. It's just simply called Dungeons, and it's 51 dungeons. And basically what I did was I really like I said before, I really enjoy creating my own stuff, but sometimes you just need ideas. So basically what I did is I took the Dyson Logos commercial pack and took those maps, and then I made up about a page or so of information about those maps, and I put it in a book just in case your players say, you mentioned a pile of rocks over there. What's under that? And you could just be like, okay, we haven't done a dungeon in a while. I'll put a dungeon under that pile of rocks. And you can just open up that book, and that can all be found on DiceGeeks.com. And and all my books are on DriveThruRPG, and they're on Amazon as well.
No, well, obviously there'll be a link to the DiceGeeks website as well, somewhere below. Again, I'm sure it's like plastered all over in the description.
somewhere down here.
Who knows? YouTube keeps changing things. They might be like left or right these days. I don't know. I try to keep up to date. But no, honestly, Matt, thank you so much for taking some time out of your afternoon to come and sit down and have this chat with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you don't mind,
thank you for staying up. I think it's late.
It's only 11 now, so that's
gosh.
That's okay. But I would be remiss if I didn't spend a moment. I've got some Kickstarter campaigns that are going on at the moment. Two of them, because March is not crazy enough already. There is the Diesel campaign, which I believe is entering its third, maybe fourth week, depending on when this comes up. But it is a D6 dice pool system created by Steve Pankatai, and a whole talented team of mechanics designers. I was privileged enough to be involved in creating some of the narrative side of things. Lots of really cool characters, some really cool settings. If you like Firefly, if you like that type of space western, and you like mechs. And what mechs is in, like, you merge your body with the mechs. There's a whole thing going on. Please do check out the Kickstarter. Secondly, there is also the Cities of Myth Atlantis Divided, which is essentially a 5e setting based in Atlantis. And that is a continuation of the Cities of Myth series run by Ron Media. Again, fantastic team, incredible stuff. If you like the idea of an underwater campaign, which again aren't too common, it's the place to go. But those are the two main ones. Again, there's a third one which I don't know if it's started yet, but I'll just stick with those two for now. And yeah, that again, once March is over, all of this again, it's me being involved in two projects of which I'm not the project lead, so that's why I have to kind of cover all the bases. But yeah, thank you for enjoying that, Matt. Otherwise, I've been Matthew Whitby. You can find me at Whitby Writes. And my very last question then is, how do you end a podcast?
I usually thank my guest for being on. So Matthew, thank you so much for having me on your show. It is a huge pleasure. So yeah, anytime you want to chat, I'm ready to go.
Yeah, no,
I'd love to have you back on my podcast as well.
Thank you.
Actually, I was going to say, really quick, you articulated a problem to me that I knew about, but I didn't articulate it that way. You talked about the door problem in RPGs on my podcast, and I really enjoyed that because I had never really articulated it that way. So now I have a name for what was tripping me up sometimes.
There'll be a link to our door problem chat. Again, I think there's been about 2 or 3 times that I've gone off about this door problem chat. I realize it's like a hot button issue for me. So yeah, if you're curious about what the door problem is, be sure to check the link in the description. And I will take a page out of your book. And thank you so much for your time, Matt. I hope you have a nice evening. And to the people listening, goodbye.
Thank you.